I'm thrilled for you to meet Natalie Kime. When I started this podcast about 4 or 5 months ago, I started talking to some contacts, people who said, you've got to talk to so-and-so. Well, Natalie was one of the first people I contacted. And I contacted her about finance issues but what I experienced since, I guess, March or April was something very, very personal. So if you've heard my prior episodes, you've heard Natalie Kime's name, but this is the first time we're recording. Welcome to Real Estate Connections Podcast, where relationships open doors. I'm Mary Foerster, and housing is a universal need. We are often thinking about our existing housing, our future housing, that possibly of family members. This is where you're going to hear the issues and the people who are working the issues every day. Please hit subscribe and like if you find this podcast helpful to you. Thank you. Natalie, welcome today to Real Estate Connections Podcast. I'm so happy to see you.
Thank you so much, Mary. I'm so excited to be here and just share whatever information we can.
Okay, great. Well, I was going to just talk to you about financial products because you are a wealth strategist. I had never heard of a wealth strategist before. So could you define what that is or describe your version of wealth strategy, and then we'll go from there?
Yeah. I mean, as a wealth strategist, what I do is I help people, individuals and families, to grow, manage, and protect and pass on their money. So I look at a client's entire financial picture rather than just picking a single investment or a single moment in time for them.
And that's exactly why I wanted to talk to you, because, I'm this classic example of a boomer who saved their money in 401ks, and now I want to spend it.
Yes.
But I'm afraid of long-term care. So we'll have that discussion at a future time.
Perfect.
What I found out when I met Natalie was that she had just moved, or recently moved, her parents from Salt Lake to Texas to be near her so that she could provide oversight as needed and care as needed. And that became, from when I talked to you, 4 months, a very accelerated journey with your mom.
Correct.
And so could you talk to us a little bit about how you prepared to go to your parents' home and assess what they needed, the help that they needed from you, and then how you proceeded that protected what their interests are, at the same time provided them help?
Yes, absolutely. I'm happy to. So my mom was diagnosed with vascular dementia in, it would have been July of 2020. And now my parents are of the opinion that we don't worry our children. And so they did not tell us. In June of 2021, my mom fell and had to be transported to the hospital for some testing. And because we knew about the fall when Dad called to update us, that was the point. So almost a year after her initial diagnosis, my brother and I were told she had a formal diagnosis. And of course, we had noticed for a few years some memory changes, not significant. We just thought, mom and dad are getting older. The memory is shifting and changing. Well, now we had a real reason for that. Because of the work I do as a wealth strategist, I started my business in 2019. I retired myself in April of 2021. And my whole goal was to get my time back so I could show up for my parents someday in the future when they needed me. Someday showed up in May of 2022 when I flew home for my mom's doctor appointment, and the doctor said they can no longer live on their own. At which point I said, I'm taking them to Texas. I have no stairs in my home, at least the downstairs of my home where there's a bedroom and a bathroom that they can utilize. And that began the journey of going back, assessing where they were at, what we needed to do next. So the summer of 2022 was trips to Utah every 3 weeks and taking one step at a time. So first and foremost, we moved my parents to my brother's home for the summer. And then the second trip was going through all their things and preparing for an estate sale. The third trip was an estate sale. And I have a cousin that's a realtor. So he met us at that point and game planned getting the house listed on the market for sale. That happened in August. So on August 10th of 2022, I brought my parents to Texas with me. So that's the process of going to their home, looking at what's going on, what do we need to do? And it was really, I'm going to call it a family affair. My brother, we both have adult children. We were all there looking at what needs to be done, who can help with what, and then putting together a timeline. And what a blessing that I had retired from corporate America and I had the ability to travel like that. I can work my business from anywhere. And so I did on those trips, oftentimes jump on client appointments and take care of things that way. But the fall prior to that was me going home after my mom's diagnosis, sitting down with my parents and my brother and looking at what do they need? What do they want? And what paperwork do they have in place? What
Yes.
things do we need to address? How do we need to protect and create accessibility to their finances for future needs? And so that was done prior to moving them here, but it was really sitting down, having some hard conversations, understanding what they wanted short-term and long-term, and then taking one step at a time to put all the proper documentation and all of the proper financial things in place to protect and provide for my parents as we moved forward.
Did you encounter any resistance from your parents? How would you describe the relationship with the decision makers in your family?
So my family, I think is pretty close and pretty communicative in general.
Mhm.
When I went out in the fall of 2021 to sit down with my parents had a red folder. It literally, if you're watching this on video, it is right there on that shelf behind me. And I
I
keep
see
it
it.
there for a reason. But my parents had a red folder. They're like, all the paperwork is in there, everything you'll ever need. And for years, my parents had said to my brother and I, when I would go home to visit, let's sit down and look at the red folder. And my brother and I would say, no, thank you. We did not want to have the conversation about someday when mom and dad were no longer here, someday when mom and dad began declining. This was before I got into the financial industry and I understand what I do today. And so when that time came, when the diagnosis came, the very first thing I wanted to do was pull out that red folder and dig through everything. So we had a very good experience in that process, other than when I told my brother, when the time comes, I will take my parents to Texas. My brother, I've been in Texas 22 years this month. And so my brother was close. He and his wife lived 15 minutes from my parents during COVID. They were the ones running back and forth, doing the grocery shopping for my parents, doing the check-ins once or twice a week. For years, that had been their role. And now I was going to move my parents here, 1,200 miles away, where the norm that both my parents and my brother were used to was going to be shifting and changing. So it was not that my brother didn't think I was capable. It was not that it didn't make sense, because it did. It was a big shift, and it was really changing the roles that he and I had. And that was a process that he needed some time to digest.
Mm-hmm.
But it was thrown out there. And then 9 months later, we had to actually make that decision, which again brought on some hard conversations. I would not say combative. I would say hard conversations, the reality of that shift happening and having to talk about why it made the most sense. He and his wife both worked outside the home. I work from home, and I created that opportunity to do just what I was about to do. And that was take care of my parents. So, were there difficult conversations? Were there a difference of opinions? Yes. But they were things that we navigated, I think, well as a family. I'm really proud of how we did that, even though it was difficult. The combativeness from my parents came initially. They didn't say a lot when I said I'm moving them to Texas, and we moved them to my brother's house. But every time I went back, every 3 weeks, the reality was hitting my parents. They were no longer in their home. They had lived there for 43 years. They had raised their kids there. And I would get the comments, we're not going to Texas. We're going to move back to our house. We don't want to go to Texas. And we would have to revisit the conversation that it was a safety issue for both mom and dad. And the concerns that came along with that for us, for their primary care physicians, and it would settle. And I remember one day being in the car with my mom and dad, and my mom was the one who said, "I'm not going anywhere. You can't make me." And I literally said, "Actually, Mom, I can make you, but I hope you don't require me to do that," because my brother and I did have all the legal documentation to invoke power of attorney and take control. And it was in that moment where I said, "Mom, please don't make me do that. I will if I have to, because this is what's best for you and Dad. But I really hope that you don't make Sean and I have to do it that way." And that was the last time it ever came up.
Wow, I'm so impressed. I cannot tell you, for my many years at AARP and just watching different families and someone in my own family now, I'm hearing the tremendous desire for independence that is being overshadowed by the issue of safety, which
Yeah.
you say so well, so well. Also, in our earlier discussion, we talked about your partnership with your dad, eventually how that evolved from moving them 1,200 miles to Texas to a very different world, from a mountainous state to flat and hot and humid. And, that's what I remember. And talk about kind of how that evolved with your dad, because he did not have dementia. He does not have dementia.
Correct.
He's lucid, yes.
Yes. And now my mom passed on June 29th of this year. And there are so many things about caregiving that are both. It is this and that. We wanted mom released from where her body and her mind had her, but having her gone now is also heart-wrenching. That process evolved over 4.5 years, almost 5 years. 3.5, almost 4 years that my parents have been here. And it was initially taking that independence. My mom's mental and physical decline was very slow for 3 years. And then it got very fast. And there were shifts every 2 weeks that were either there was a mental shift or a physical shift from November of last year, the week before Thanksgiving, until the point that she passed. So it was pretty steady for quite a while. But even for my dad, that independence, we did not bring the truck he had here. We didn't actually know if it would make the drive. And, we have multiple cars here. You can just take my car when you need to go somewhere, because he can to this day still drive, just on the surface streets, but he can still drive. And a couple of months after my parents were here, my dad got really upset when we were getting ready to sit down for breakfast on a Sunday morning. And I couldn't understand what he was so frustrated about. And I kept trying to get him to talk to me. And I think maybe he didn't know how to exactly voice what he was feeling. He needed some time to digest it, to have a good conversation. And I kept pushing the issue. And he stormed out of the house and went for a walk. And so I waited about 15 minutes and I got in my car and I went driving around the neighborhood looking for him. And I have a beautiful little pond that's across the street behind my house. And I found him walking around the pond, and with some coaxing got him to get in the car with me. With some additional coaxing got him to open up. And he said, "I don't even have my own car." And it was in that moment that I realized, yes, he could take my car, but it was my car. We had taken away all of the significant things in their life that were theirs. And the very next day I canceled my schedule and we went car shopping.
All right.
And got him a little car.
All right.
So it's that. It has been the communication, which is not always easy. My dad is one that will just bottle things up. And then, all of a sudden you're like, what's happening? And it's things that have been going on for a while. And so he and I have both had to learn how to communicate differently with each other. And when my mom's decline started, for most of the things after that, we did a pretty good job of navigating. But when mom's decline started, I remember saying to my dad, my job is caregiving. your job is to be her husband and love her. And I looked at my boyfriend who lives with us and I said, your job is to be my dad's friend.
Oh,
So at that point,
wise.
when the needs became very clear and significantly escalated, those very defined roles were necessary and they kept us sane through the process. We didn't get it perfect, but they kept us sane through the process in that we weren't crossing over and stepping on one another to try to all do the same thing. We knew we had a defined role and we took ownership of that and then asked for help and support where we needed it.
Amazing to me. I can't tell you how emotional I feel in this conversation. I've never had this experience before. And I'm so grateful to you that we have had an opportunity to follow up since your mom's passing, because I know that whole regression had a lot of beautiful lessons to it as well. When we talked a few months ago, you talked about a partnership with your dad.
Yeah.
And that when you went to sell the house, he wasn't passive. He was a partner, a full partner in we had the legal documents, but you also had kind of the emotional buy-in too, it sounds like.
Yeah. I think at the point that we put the house on the market and I moved them here within a few days of each other. I honestly think that physical separation suddenly made it a little bit easier, right? They weren't driving down the street thinking, oh, I would turn there to go home, or seeing all the things they normally saw that reminded them on a daily basis what no longer existed. So I almost think once we made the physical transfer to Texas, in some ways that part of it became easier. But yeah, because we had set some things up financially the prior year, once the house sold, we had already had the conversation about where should that money go? I mean, like I said, my parents were there 43 years. They bought that house for $49,000 and sold it for almost 10 times. So over $400,000, and it was paid for. So here's going to come this big lump sum of money. What do we do with it? What makes sense? How do we make sure it's going to last as long as they do and can meet any and all needs they have? Because my parents were blessed enough that with their little retirements, my dad's from the military, my mom's from her job, Social Security, they were bringing in more money than they needed per month. So we did not need that money for the existing living expenses they had at that time. It was all about setting it up for the future. But because we'd had all of the conversations the year prior, right after the diagnosis came, we already had a plan. And so when it came time to take each step in that plan from a financial perspective, they were very simple to do. And there was already some understanding and a baseline we were building from. And I think that made that very easy for my dad to participate in. And honestly, my dad says, listen, I want you to explain it to me so I know what we're doing, but don't dive too deep. I trust what you're doing. I know you're licensed to do the work you do. I know you're doing for us what you would do for any other family. And so that I trust. Just tell me where it's going to go and how it's going to help us. And so that's something I do with my clients is it's not transactional for me. It's relational for me. The same way I did for my parents. What's most important to them? What concerns them the most? And ensuring that they understand that where we are going addresses those concerns that they have and takes care of the needs that they're trying to make sure they're prepared for.
Yes.
And that all came from going through this experience with my parents.
You know, in real estate and how I became a realtor was studying how to do business by referral. But the core of doing business by referral is doing the very best job you can for your client, right?
Yeah.
The very best. And building on that relationship, not transactional, not waiting for the next deal, the next opportunity, but you end up being part of people's lives and decision-making for a fairly intense period. And you are really gifted with the wisdom to know that and to be able to do that as you're doing it for your family, but to do it for your clients.
Thank you.
And that echoes across all professions, not just financial wealth strategy,
Yeah.
real estate, mortgage lending, whatever. So thank you for emphasizing that.
Oh,
The
you're
other
welcome.
thing, the other thing I'm thinking about is that there's a profound respect, I would say, that I'm hearing from you, a profound respect within your family.
Mm-hmm.
And the hardest thing, I think, as I watch people go through this transition with their kids, is the issue of parents not wanting to be dependent on their children.
Yeah.
I don't want to be, like you said, but part of the leaving this body, leaving this physical world, is leaving some of your wealth behind for your kids as well. So you're setting them up.
Right.
That's our goal. Many people can't do it, of course, but that's definitely a desire, a deep desire in our culture, I think, in our culture.
Yes.
And so I hear a profound respect. I have to commend you on the way in which you handled, in which you continue to handle, because your dad's still with us. You continue to address things where there might be resistance or there might be pushback.
Yeah.
And that is just tremendous. The other area is the area with family, because there are a lot of pressures within a family, as we do know.
There always are. Yes.
As we do know.
We're
So
all individuals. We all have our own thoughts and the way that we process things. And so, yeah, it's just a constant.
constant. So
Yeah.
they moved into your home.
Yes.
And they had their own space.
Yep.
And then over time, your mom began to decline faster. It sounds like every 2 weeks you said you saw a change. Boy,
Yeah.
that was fast when it started, wasn't it?
It was really fast. I think one of the ways that we were very blessed is in every stage of my mom's dementia journey, we had phenomenal support, phenomenal doctors, home health, hospice. And when we were at that appointment where the doctor said your parents can no longer live on their own, the doctor took the time to explain that with vascular dementia, statistics show that from diagnosis to death is 5 to 7 years. And how that will happen is that there may be a drastic event, a stroke, that takes your person or significantly takes them from where they were to needing intense care. So it's a big single event, or there will suddenly become a very rapid decline. So we were told that almost 4 years before it happened. And so there was that information already there. Now, I will say, I did not come into caregiving knowing all the answers, having done all the research with any kind of certification. I learned a ton as I went, but every time I ran into an issue, I asked more questions, whether it was on Google, whether it was to doctors, to professionals in all different realms, to other caregivers that I was blessed to get connected with along the way. We had tons of support. And so in a sense, when that next step came, we kind of already knew what direction to go. And we went through some medication changes to handle my mom went from a very calm, temperate dementia patient to psychotic overnight. And when you're dealing with elder care of any kind, whether it's memory care or not, there can be a lot more frequent infections of all different kinds. That can cause that. So that was the initial thought. Well, we ended up in the hospital and it wasn't related to that, which now we knew, okay, this is a significant advancement and shift in her vascular dementia. And so it took us about 2 months. My sleep patterns were crazy. It was like having a newborn again. For anybody who's had children, you're worried, are they sleeping okay? Oh my gosh, they slept really long. Are they breathing? Or they're not sleeping. I've got to get up. I've got to be on high alert all the time. And so that 2 months, I remember telling my brother, I don't know how I made it through that 2 months, but we do. Just like when we have new babies, you go from being independent and living your life to all of a sudden this little human depends on you for everything. It is very much the same at the other end of life. And so through all of that, again, a lot of communication, a lot of research, me learning to advocate very loudly with respect, but very loudly for my mom and push back against what the elder care industry might suggest. Putting her in a home, hiring full-time caregiving in my own home, and dealing with this huge shift in my mom, which was my biggest concern. And honestly, my brother will say all the time, you did the hard work. And I said, no, I did what my job was, which was the hands-on caregiving. And his job was to care for me, which he did profoundly well. He listened to me cry. He listened to me vent. He listened to my frustrations. And most importantly, he reminded me who I was. And in that time frame, that's exactly what he did. He said, are you ready to quit? And by the way, it's okay if you are, Nat. You've carried this for a really long time. And I said, no, I'm not ready to quit. And he said, then why are you listening to what other people are saying? You know what mom wanted. You know what you're capable of. Act based on that. That was huge for me. And so through that process, there was all of this. We finally did get medications adjusted correctly. At one point, I called a doctor and said, I am taking her off this medication. Period. Full stop. The only thing I need for you is to tell me how to do it safely. And those are the kind of things you have to find your voice in this process. And I want to touch on one other quick thing through the process. The biggest thing, it is a huge shift for our parents, like you said, to become dependent on us. And the one reference I'll make there is I remember my dad saying to me one time, I feel so guilty that we've become a burden on you.
Yes.
And one thing I learned very early on was to redefine the word burden. Because I think that the word burden has a very negative connotation as something that weighs you down. Now, caregiving for my parents, yes, there is a weight to it, but I am grateful and blessed to be able to do it. And I had to reframe that definition for my dad. I said, if you want to look at the standard definition of burden, yes, you have added an additional burden to my life. However, I am not upset about it. It is something I prepared for in my career, in my mind, in my heart, and I am blessed to be able to do it. So does it exist? Yes. But is it something that you need to feel guilty about? Absolutely not. And that was a big shift, I think, for my dad in our partnership and our communication, is that we're going to redefine things. We redefined what joy was in the process, because watching my dad see the love of his life for 60 years decline is one of the most heart-wrenching things I've ever observed. If you have watched the movie The Notebook,
yes,
it is very much like that, but with her here and seeing it 24/7 in real time. That is heart-wrenching. And we found moments to laugh, moments of joy. We had dance parties. All of the things. We made jokes about things that everyday people would probably say, why are you joking about that? Well, because that's our reality. And you can choose to find joy and laughter through difficult things, or you can choose to get stuck on the negative side of what you're facing. And in caregiving, there's a lot of that. Yes. And so why live only there? No, we fought to find joy. We fought to have gratitude. And we fought to build love and beautiful memories through the most difficult journey we've ever walked. And that is the thing I'm most proud of. We did not do it perfectly at all. I lost my patience. I got frustrated. I sat and cried many times, but we made it through intact as a family. And I think even stronger and more connected as a family than we've ever been. And for that reason, we won. We
Awesome.
lost mom in our battle against vascular dementia, but we won overall. And I think that is the thing I'm most grateful for.
You did a magnificent service to our culture by recording a lot of what was going on with your mom. There's a lot of video on Chat with Nat, and on YouTube too. Did you have a blog or anything like that? Is everything within Chat with Nat?
I do have some blog format, written blog format on Substack. My podcast, the video versions of my podcast are on YouTube, but the short everyday videos and things that were going on, those live in my social media. So in my Instagram is where you can really see the everyday journey that we walked.
The moving your mom from her living arrangement with your dad into the dining room is what you told me. That the bed went into the dining room, and I thought, oh, that is so vivid. It is so vivid. When you brought a baby over to be held by your mom and videoed the baby, when your community of faith came over to be with her toward the end, so beautiful, so beautiful.
Thank you.
It was very private, but you shared it, which was just amazing. And I thank you for that. I can't wait to share this episode with our world, our respective world. And Natalie and I are going to do more of these discussions, get back to some of the financial as well. But this is a very emotional issue. And it really pulls and tugs at our culture and our values. And we have a lot of those that are shared.
We do.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your generous spirit, a very generous spirit you have.
You're welcome. It has been my pleasure. So thank you for having me, and thank you for guiding me through this conversation, being able to bless others from the journey that we've been on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you found this conversation useful to you and your real estate goals. You'll find the contact information for our guests and any links they recommend you have in the show notes. And should we be able to help you identify some strong real estate professionals in your area, drop us a note at info@realestateconnectionspodcast.com. Thanks again, and bye for now.